Hey everyone, welcome to this video narration. This one's going to be even more different than the other ones that I've done so far. This is a fantasy epic that I started back in high school, so over a decade ago. This is something that I've always had on the back burner. I've been editing it ever since I started it, but it's finally getting to the point that I think that it's ready to be let loose into the world. So without further ado, this is the prologue to The Outsider. Wet boots slapped quick and anxious as they hurried across deserted, mud-paved streets, splashing through shallow puddles and skidding around sharp bends with desperate abandon. Hoarse breaths came in gasps from overused lungs, accompanied here and there with low curses as they passed patches of putrid sties that turned the dirt a sudden sludgy green. Panicked eyes spun to narrow alleys, low-slung roofs, and deep-shadowed doorways as they ran. A man at the back of the spook throng misstepped, wailing painfully as his ankle twisted under him. He landed hard and sliding on the unforgiving ground, struggling to get back on his feet. One of his nearest companions, a man clad in flowing gray robes, slowed to help, but their leader, a tall, harsh-faced bruiser at the front, yelled in an accented voice full of command and thick with fear, "Leave him, Nell! It's no good!" Nell hesitated for the merest instant before taking a few quickened back steps away from his fallen comrade, who clawed at the air and ground as he begged for help. The look on Nell's face spoke for the whole group. "Better them than me," it read. There came a hiss over the din of the rain and racing footfalls, a low crack that rent the night. Nell halted at the sound, as did everyone else, as a chill swept through them. A look of confusion spread across his thin face, and he placed a hand on the back of his head, resting it there for a few seconds, perplexed, then moved it to the front of his face. The hand was very wet and very red. Nell's eyes rolled into the back of his head, and he slumped limply to the ground. The group stared in wide-eyed confusion at their comrade's senseless body, until a woman in the middle of them screamed, "He found us!" A cry broke through the group's shock. They were sprinting now, frantically, haphazardly, trying to get to the town's outskirts at any cost. The first fallen man's pleas followed them for a short time, his curses growing ever more hysterical, until his strange shouts suddenly stopped. The group dared not look back. Someone shouted at their leader, "Nicky, what are we gonna do?" Nicky the Knick-Knack's throat was choked with nerves, his ex-military mind a chaos of instinct. "Just keep running!" was all he could think to shout back. Again, they skidded around a corner, the latecomers plowing into the ones in front as they had to slow. At last, the low rows of terrace buildings finally stopped at the end of a long street, opening to a field of chest-high grass and weeds. Beyond that, the welcoming sight of the shielding orchard. They could hide in there for a while. No outsider, even the one chasing them, could possibly know his way around that thick maze of trees. A man next to Nicky allowed himself a quick sigh of relief as he slowed to turn the corner, the freedom from the night's terror spreading across his face. But the relief was short-lived, as with another low hiss and crack, something slammed in the side of his head and created a thin mist of crimson as it did. A man's collapse sent Nicky's group into a frenzied, blind panic. They ran faster and faster, hurling themselves onward to their only chance at safety. As they closed the distance, step by step, the group was disbanded. One man was yanked down a dark alley that he had passed too close by. Another two, busy trying to trip one another, were both in turn tripped by something long, black and sinewy, which hauled them screaming into the shadowed roofs above as it wound tight around their feet. Then, when they had passed the last bunch of houses, with only a few yards to go to the shrouding grass, The red-headed woman who had screamed so shrilly earlier was abruptly pulled back, screeching and thrashing towards a hunched, dark form on top of one of the nearest gabled arches. When Nicky stole a look over his shoulder, he saw a sharp movement in the shadows, and the woman's increasing pitch suddenly broke off. When they reached the tall grass, Nicky and his remaining four were forced to slow a little in order to wade through the thick verdure. To Nicky, the hiss of the grass brushing past his arms sounded like that Nagul spawning pit he'd been forced to sneak around back when his crew was only a few members strong. And now, just like then, three of them fell with little more than surprised yelps, disappearing from sight and sound as they were snared by their doom. With a curse, Nicky pushed forward, hopping and bounding through those accursed weeds and bramble, as his only remaining flunky, a red-faced, pock-marked man, did the same, following him as close as he dared. An eternity of side stitches and briar patches later, they reached the vale of blooming elder-end trees. The two dashed left and right, losing themselves in the verdant maze, the lumpy lackey coming up beside his boss, hacking up phlegm and fragmented words. You think we lost him? A trip snare hidden by a few twigs and leaves answered that question, whipping the man off his feet before slamming him hard against a nearby trunk. A homemade sign that was nailed next to the dangling, bludgeoned man read, "Please don't climb on the trees." Disregarding the sign, Nicky flung himself near the fruit-laden branches. Half crazed by purest fear, his body shot up to the canopy faster than any squirrel, seeking shelter within the wide leaves. When he was near the top, he forced himself to quiet his gasps, resolving that he would just wait out the danger until morning. He would bribe a cart driver to take him to Greensboro and to get help from some old gambling buddies that lived there. "I've still got some favors to pull," Nicky reassured himself. "Lem will give me some help. He owes me too much money not to, and I can clear his debts. Then there's Tommy. He's got that hideaway up north." He let himself calm down a little, thinking that the safety was just a few hours and a few gold sovereigns away. A mistake. "Don't you know how to read?" The voice came from behind and above Nicky and his now glaciered heart. It was smooth as glass, iron strong, and deeper than any abyss. A voice he had dreaded ever since he first heard it an hour ago at the Cotter's Inn. Gulping down a throttling lump in his throat, Nicky began to turn around towards the speaker. The branches that were surrounding Nicky all at once collapsed, cocooning him in an embrace of sharp, pointy bands. Nicky froze, knowing that if he moved even an inch, he would be cut, stabbed, and worse by the wooden trap. That is, if it could move at all, as the wooden bands were tight enough to make even shallow breathing an effort. All he could do was watch in growing horror as the figure dressed in a dark traveling coat, large mud-stained boots, and a wide-brim hat emerged from the shadowy canopy above. The figure loomed over Nicky, piercing him with brown-green eyes that flashed with hateful satisfaction as they glared out from the deeper darkness cast by the hat. "Nicky the Knick-Knack," the voice said, heavy with finality. "Quite the bounty. 10 for each intact head of your gang, 5 for the broken ones, and 500 for yours, alive or dead." The bounty hunter came a little closer, a jagged scar that crossed his right eye shining. Nicky could smell the reek of cabbage and meat wash over his face as the man continued speaking. "But that's only part of what I'm interested in. With a rustle of cloth, the bounty hunter raised an arm in front of him, pulling back the sleeve of his coat as he did. Nicky saw that the arm underneath was also crisscrossed with countless scars. But over the mars and ropes of knotted muscle were an intricate latticework of black markings in an unknown script that covered the greater part of the hunter's skin past the wrists, disappearing under the withdrawn sleeve. To Nicky's pounding ears, he thought he heard the shadowed man mutter something. A curse? A threat? A prayer? The possibilities playing around Nicky's ravaged senses came to a stuttering halt at the sight that manifested before him. Violet light in the form of vapor began rising from the now glowing markings on the bounty hunter's arm. A pulse of brighter color seemed to ripple from the shoulder to the wrist along the avenues marked out by the tattoos. When it reached the end of the arm, a corona of glowing mist enveloped the upraised hand, partially obscuring it. But it was the man's eyes that turned Nicky's bowels to water and made him remember that everything that his mother had said about not getting involved with crime. The greenish brown of the bounty hunter's irises and the black of his pupils had turned a luminescent purple that crackled with energy, and every now and then seemed to spark with flashes of lightning. Taradi, thought Nicky, the name coming unbidden to his through his fevered terror. This bastard's a mage. For some absurd reason, Nicky was reminded of the scent of lavender as the bounty hunters reached out to place his own holy palm on Nicky's moist brow. You have two options, the bounty hunter growled. I can take what I need and leave you gibbering husk for the Grosilic to sort out. That, or you tell me what I want, and I'll leave you with most of your wits, scant as they are. The fingers around Nicky's temples tightened, emphasizing the hunter's next few words. I'll know if you're lying. Nicky didn't doubt it for a second. He knew that being handed over to the Grosilic troops and imprisoned in Pergotham Keep was just slightly more bearable than the alternative. He'd heard the rumors, everyone had, about how mages could invert your skin, turn your bones to mush, fill your heads with demons that would play hell with your thoughts. And that was just the dabblers. Who knew what a professional like this one could do? So, without pause, Nicky the Knick-Knack, notorious one-time gang lord of Coppisfield, who was just a few hours ago had over 1,000 thugs, lowlifes, counterfeiters, and muscle working under him, began to sing his heart out for all he was worth. Which, until just that moment, had been quite a lot indeed. When Nicky had stopped, thinking he was done, he stuttered, thinking that he could finish exactly what he was saying. But it hadn't been enough. The bounty hunter had pressed him for even more. Nicky couldn't know more than what he had already said. But there were some things in this world that even someone as influential as he had been knew better than to pry into if they valued their skin. But he happened to know someone who did. Alright guys, that's the end of that prologue. I'm going to probably have the next segment up probably in the next couple of days or so. I know I missed reading last week, but I'm making it up for you guys, so I'll probably have the first official chapter of the story up. So I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any comments, feel free to leave them in the comments box, and I will see you later. Have a good one.